Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Motomori Fight Club. Today, we have the Johnsons joining us to share their family story about their journey with infertility and adoption. Ben and Erin, can you guys just give yourself a quick introduction for our listeners?
Sure. So I'm Erin Johnson, and then I'm here with my husband, Ben. And we were high school sweethearts, actually. And yes, definitely have struggled with infertility, and just our cross has been dealing with that for many years. I do feel like we're kind of on the other side of things now, but it's definitely been a challenge.
Yeah, I'm here too.
Hi, Ben.
I'm here too. I'm a part of this journey. I think I'm 50% of the journey, and yeah, it's been something that's been probably near and dear to our hearts that we didn't realize it at the time how it was going to shape us, and probably now, as Erin said, on the others, or maybe having crested that hill, realizing maybe what a blessing in disguise that it was, because it brought us closer together, as a couple. It brought us closer to God, and so it's one of those things that has shaped us and guided us and grown us, even though it was a not so smooth journey.
So how long into your marriage did you guys realize that y'all were struggling with infertility?
So we got married in 2006. Had to think back a minute there. And then we immediately started a graduate school out in Lubbock. And so we weren't necessarily trying. And honestly, at that time, I was on birth control pills, which thankfully we had super strong Catholic friends that we met pretty quickly after getting married who really challenged us with a lot of things. In a good way, very much in a good way. But she challenged, one of my really good friends challenged me to look into, why the church opposes birth control. And even though I was on it for medical reasons, it really, once I started praying about it and discerning about it and doing some research and reading the catechism, I really convicted me to get off of the birth control pills. And I really haven't looked back since then. And I am so thankful for that, because then that introduced me to NFP and kind of starting to research my cycles and things like that, which was, again, a blessing in disguise, because then after we had started trying to get pregnant, I was very aware that I had relatively normal cycles. And so it just kind of weeded out a lot of potential issues that would have been wrong with my body that then we knew, like, we'll know all of that's correct, because I had been tracking for years at that point. But we were in graduate school for two full years, right? And then we started trying to get pregnant. So about 2 years into our marriage. And pretty quickly, I would say within 3 to 6 months, knew something wasn't right. Again, we had so many big Catholic friends and families that
look at each other the wrong way and they get pregnant.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, I know some of those families.
Yes.
So we were trying for our first, and we had friends who were already on their third baby. And so we were like, wait, something is not right. So we started obviously going to doctors, and we've had multiple surgeries, and I feel like we were poked and prodded just week after week for probably a solid year or two.
The poking and prodding actually hadn't started. We didn't know it yet, but the investigation was probably the least painful part of it. Yeah, I don't have much to offer, about that. I think that's obviously it's a joint decision, and that journey that newly married couples make and say, we want to grow our family and we want to do that, and it just happens, right? It's not saying, once you make that decision, you think the rest of it takes care of itself, and maybe most of the time it does, but in our case it didn't. But it was a transition to NFP when we truly, I guess when we started NFP, it wasn't necessarily I don't think we really started truly doing NFP until we were like, wait a minute, we're not getting pregnant, because I thought there was only one thing involved with getting pregnant, and it wasn't figuring out what day it was just doing the act. And then once you figure that out, and that's when I'd say there's a lot of men that don't know anything about their life cycle. But as a NFP is not just for mom, it's for the family. It's natural family planning, and the husband has to be involved in that and understand, for whatever reason that you're using it. They have to understand that. So learning about that was a new thing for me, and it as that transition, I mean, I think we fast forwarded quite a bit from, we started NFP and we waited a couple of months and then we went to doctors. I mean, I think there was I don't remember when the first time we started actually investigating this isn't working, but I feel like there was a really long time. Maybe it was an emotional time, but not truly like a chronologically long time before you're like, everybody's, their kids are getting older and we're doing the same thing over and over. A little bit of insanity there, that doing the same thing over and over, expecting something to change, and you think it's going to change, and every 21 to 28 days being disappointed again. So I think it was again, very early in the journey, was a transition point once we found ourselves in the doctor's offices, because that was a totally different road a different road as a part of that journey, where you start to realize, I struggled with that from a science and religion standpoint. From my medical background, medicine exists to cure us. Medicine exists to help us achieve a goal, whether that be health or pregnancy or anything like that. So I struggled because we eventually found that there were options for us.
Well, and I just wanted to add along the NFP lines too, that I had, of course, everything's computerized now, but back then, 13 years ago, 15 years ago, we charted everything on paper. And so I had probably a year's worth of tracking my cycles that I brought to multiple doctors. And I cannot tell you how many of them laughed at me and said, you know more about that than I do. And that was so shocking to me, that the medical community isn't even educated on some very basic aspects of our female health. So yes, where we were in West Texas, I never ran into, I think I have found one doctor who actually was educated and was able to kind of look at my charts and help me, but it was few and far between for sure. And even the fertility doctor that we saw didn't really see any benefit in looking at them, really. So
wow, that's surprising. I didn't realize that they wouldn't know that. You would think OBGYNs that would kind of be their bread and butter, but wow, that's interesting.
I think that might be an overstatement.
I went to multiple
because
doctors,
to say they don't know when pregnancy happens during a cycle is like,
I'm not saying that, but being able to like look at my charts and say like, this is what I'm seeing. It just wasn't. It wasn't received the way that I thought it would be in the medical field. So,
do you feel like y'all's intuition kind of just kicked in pretty fast? This is what we're supposed to be doing. This isn't happening. We're in the doctors. Do you feel like there was just like maybe a grace that the Lord gave y'all to say like, there's other options that we need to start looking at?
Definitely. I mean, I don't know about Ben. He can speak maybe to his own personal experience, but I mean, ever since I was young, like I remember being in high school and writing down like things that were important to me about my husband, and it always like being open to adoption was one of those things. And so I just have always felt drawn to adoption. I don't know why. I just always felt called to that and drawn to that. I think Ben had probably the opposite experience.
I was a late adopter, if that, no pun intended. I was a late adopter. No, I was not. I think there were several parts of the journey that were hard. I think that was one of the biggest hangups, if you can use it that way, for me, was, again, back to that kind of medical thing, is they said, well, here's your options. You have endometriosis, you have this, and these are the options. When the reproductive endocrinologist looked at us and said, well, if you want to get pregnant, this is your option and this is how it will happen.
Which was, I mean, that was kind of a defining point. Like that is a core memory for me, for sure. I don't know if it is for you, but
well, I think it certainly shaped it, because that was the point where it was basically put back in our hands to say, you can move forward with this, and then that's when kind of all of our investigation and education and learning and praying and looking at, boy, this is where the Catholic Church stands on introducing all of these things into something that the Lord is supposed to be planning. That was the defining moment, right? That was where you choose to take on what they are suggesting, or you choose to put it into the Lord's hands. And I don't actually remember when I was not like anti-adoption. I was just like, listen, here's the solution. You just do this and we get pregnant. We have our own kids.
So ultimately we kind of skipped ahead a little bit, but I have endometriosis. Ben has some sperm issues. I honestly don't even remember now. It's been so long ago. And after my endometriosis surgery, with our follow up after my surgery, that was the recommendation, was our reproductive endocrinologist, which is an infertility doctor, ultimately told us that the only way she could foresee us getting pregnant, outside of what she said was a miracle, was for us to do in vitro. And at this point, we had built such a relationship with her that I just told her no. It's like, that's not an option for us. And she cried, we cried, and she just saw it as her job to help us get pregnant and wanted us to continue to seek her help. But she just wanted to help us ultimately. I mean, I truly think her heart was in the right place. And so it was just a very delicate conversation of us letting her know that just morally and ethically we couldn't proceed with that option. And, we did appreciate her help. At the time, she also was looking into getting FDA approval for an embryo adoption program. She had embryos that were stored there. So when people do in vitro fertilization, oftentimes they create multiple embryos, anywhere from 2 to 20. And so, in the Catholic faith, we believe that's a human life, right? The sperm and the egg are combined, and then they usually let them continue to divide up to, I think, day 5, and then they freeze them. So it's a 5-day-old embryo. And many families only want 1, maybe 2 children, and then the rest of them get frozen, which is obviously a huge moral and ethical issue. At the time, 15 years ago, when I had looked into it, the statistics I heard was there were over 500,000 embryos stored in the United States. Wow. Now I think the number is closer to 1 million. So, my heart goes out to those little embryos, because they're little frozen souls that are kind of stuck in limbo. They don't have an opportunity to get to heaven yet. And, it's such a huge moral issue that I think a lot of people don't consider when they do say yes to IVF. They're just so desperate to have a child. And it's hard. It's a hard decision to make. But when you have a doctor telling you this is your chance, I think so many people, if you don't have that faith and you don't have the backing of the church to tell you what is right and wrong, then you say yes and you do it. And then you think of the moral repercussions later. It's like, oh, well, we're done with our family, but we've got 10 embryos left. What do we do? And that's a hard decision to make too. And I definitely wouldn't want to be in their shoes, but there's a lot that goes into IVF that I think a lot of people, and really our society and our culture, don't think about. It's just not addressed.
Well, not till it has to be. Yeah. I mean, it's always thought about at some point, but yeah, I think, Dr. Phi she was great for us. She, like Erin said, she had a job, and her job was help us get pregnant, because that was what we showed up on her doorstep to do. I'm sure that there are definitely reproductive endocrinologists out there that they're kind of handcuffed, because even if they have to separate the religious beliefs from their scientific training. So even in those, but I felt like she had the middle ground, and she certainly respected our decision to say, this is not an option for us. And she said, okay, well, I mean, this is kind of where the journey ends, but here is this door. And I don't know if that's where we started looking. Learned about it there, but it was definitely something that pushed us. And that was another kind of little turn in the journey, where you are empowered again to say, okay, well, this is our option to do it. This is our option of how we're going to grow our family.
But at the same time, we didn't have a ton of money. And the more we looked into adoption, adopting through an agency is $20,000 to $50,000. It is not cheap.
Domestically.
Yeah, domestically. Yeah. I mean, the 40 to 50,000 is closer to if you're going to do international adoptions. But yes, if you're going to adopt domestically through an agency, it's expensive. We definitely could not afford that as new graduates. Ben was working as an athletic trainer, and they don't make a ton of money. So
I can relate. You do not make a lot of money in athletic training.
Yes. So we were like, well, that's not an option. And our ongoing joke and kind of prayer was that, like, God, we just need to find somebody who has a baby. They just need to give us their baby, you know? And so that was kind of our joke between us. We never said it out loud because people would think we were absolutely insane, but
We would not have turned it down, though.
yeah. So anyway, so we just kind of continued on. I was working, we were, new employees, and so we were working and just trying to figure it out. And truly for me, adoration is what kept me afloat. It's what kept me sane. Um, I had a holy hour on Thursdays, and it was at night, and literally nobody else was in there, and it was just me and Jesus and the candles, and that was it. And it was just so beautiful. And I have journal entries from that time that I truly just like wrestled with God. There were nights I would just like sit in there and just cry and argue with God, just being like, what are you doing? Like, what do you want from me? Because I felt such a strong call to be a mother. I knew that that was my vocation, but I just had no clue how we were going to get there. And this is probably like 3 years into this journey. We're like, okay, we can't afford adoption. We're trying to do the right thing by not doing in vitro. Like, what do you want from us? It was just, it's such a hard place to be in. But also, again, looking back, you can see that like God brought us to this point so that we would be open to all the things he had for us.
I think she had been there for a while. Not that I wasn't anti-adoption. I think adoption it's so prevalent.
I think it's different for men. I mean, obviously, men deal with this whole situation differently than women.
Well, I think to a certain extent, yes, but I was still struggling with, there was a solution that this was like, I was trying to simplify it in the sense that if you want a kid, here, like, do this and then you'll have a kid. And then, no, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, like, do you think that you're being more open to in vitro, do you think it had to do with your conversion? Like, you're not being raised as a Catholic? Because I was always raised Catholic and was taught growing up that that was not okay.
Yeah.
So I don't.
I suppose because, well, like I mentioned, like in the beginning of this, that it was like,
Or your medical background.
well, I mean, our faith journey is a journey, right? It changes. That I was not Catholic. I was not raised Catholic. I was raised in the church, and I had, a belief system in place, and that grew, and it grew as I learned more about it. And she mentioned the people that they come into your lives, and they show you how to be, maybe to be Catholic, or they grow you. And so I was hung up in, this was I guess it had to be pre-conversion, because I was like, listen, this whole body blood thing is really, that it's a real hang up for me. And I'm just not quite sure. And so I remember at a point in my life where it was like, that was the hang up, right? I loved your Catholic beliefs, and I'll be Catholic. How many Catholics actually, truly believe in the body? I did some crazy percentage. I don't know what it, yeah. But sure, I'll be Catholic, but boy, I'm not sure I'm buying that. And then that transitioned also to this whole, introduction. I forget how the catechism reads it, but the introduction of the third person into the act,
act,
into the marital act, of whether that's IVF or IUI or, any of these things. That was another part of I suppose, the conversion story. I was Catholic at that point, but reading the catechism and learning about that was a point where you choose to be. You're not more Catholic, I suppose, but that's the way that I view it, that way, that you're like, well, listen, there was a point in my Catholic journey where, listen, if you want to live out this faith, then choose to live it the way that it's intended. And that's through adoption. I don't remember when it was, but
I do, because it was literally a week before we found out about Jacob, our oldest. I mean, the timelines of, I know we're kind of jumping around in our story, but like, if I sat and wrote everything down, you cannot deny that it was divinely inspired. Like, everything, the way it lined up. Ben was very just not ready to adopt yet. And then about a week before we found out about our oldest that we ended up adopting, he came to me and was like, okay, I think I'm ready. Like, let's look into it.
Yeah, so maybe if we go back to and we say, okay, there was this time where we said, okay, we're going to pursue this adoption thing, and this is obviously in the best investigation of saying, hey, domestic adoption is very expensive. What are your options? Well, one of the options is to adopt through CPS, to adopt through the children that are already here, which is foster to adopt, which was an even harder thing for me to go down. I mean, I think there are certainly a number of people who have a great story and say, well, we fostered these children and we adopted them. But the thought, like, I guess that's in the class, but the thought of somebody coming to take
a kid from your family is just something that emotionally we weren't sure that we could deal with. So we did look into the foster to adopt. We went to a class and they gave us a bathroom break about an hour in, and we hightailed it out of there. It just was not a good fit for us for multiple reasons. But then about a week, maybe 2 weeks after Ben was open to adoption.
I would love to know what the timeline difference was. I don't remember between going to that class and being really angry.
But we ended up, I had been volunteering with the church's youth group for probably about a year at that point, and honestly was thinking about stopping because I just felt like I didn't have a connection with these kids. They weren't really talking to me. They weren't opening up. And for whatever reason, one night, one of the girls mentioned that her friend was pregnant and wanted to give the baby up for adoption. The birth mother was
didn't she
16 at the time.
She said she'd just pray for her because she doesn't know what to do. Yeah. She hasn't told her parents. She is considering abortion. She may be considering adoption. She just can we just pray for her?
Mm-hmm. And so, like, after that talk, I kind of pulled this girl aside and said, if your friend truly wants to give her baby up for adoption, we may be interested.
Give us your baby.
Oh my goodness. We did not say that to her.
You can put that in there or you can take it out, but
it's staying.
In the least creepy way. Yeah, abortion was basically that's the message, is there are other options.
Yes. And so her friend did mention, she said, well, you don't want this baby. She tried to drink bleach. She tried to kill the baby. And I said, it doesn't matter, but we may be interested. And for whatever reason, foster to adopt didn't feel right. But the minute we found out about this baby, we knew that he was ours. Adoption is scary because you don't legally have any rights to the baby until 48 hours after it's born. So you have to wait those 2 days before the mother can sign over any kind of rights. So it's scary until 2 days after birth, until you start to get a sense of relief. Timeline-wise, we told the friend about that we were interested, and then the birth mother contacted us maybe the next day.
It was within a few days, a week at the most.
And then we started talking to her. I actually ended up talking to.
Before we get into a bunch of criminal problems, we said because this girl was 16, she was 15 or 16, said, have you told your parents? If you haven't told your parents, you need to tell them. Please tell them with the confidence to know that you have options. Yeah. Please tell them, that I wasn't sure what to do, but this is what I found out. And please let them know that there are options. And this was another one of those like divine intervention, because we didn't know it at the time. I mean, she obviously knew it, but she happened to approach her parents, who were not her birth parents either.
Oh, wow.
She is 16. She was adopted from a teenage mother.
Well, she was adopted through CPS.
Through CPS by these people from a teenage mother. And so when you talk about her taking on what we were perceiving maybe at the time to be a really unknown, like, hey, mom and dad, this is a really scary situation. She was approaching people who had literally been in our shoes. They had been in our shoes. And so it could not have been a more maybe perfect transition, because she was approaching people who called us and said, this is absolutely a great scenario, that we understand this. We are going to work through this. And her mom was, I guess we'll get to it as we kind of, because those were a whirlwind couple of weeks. We didn't realize it at the time, obviously, how quickly this thing was going to really transpire. But she was approaching people that it ended up being this very smooth, almost a sense of calmness, because when this mother called, I can only imagine a teenage daughter approaching a parent saying, I am pregnant, but I found these other people who said they'll take the baby. Like, did these people approach you? Who are they? You are crazy. This is no. And come to find out, this, her mother was like, this is perfect. I love the plan. And she took her, and within a week she was at the OB-GYN, and she texted us and said, we have an appointment.
Well, it was 3 weeks from the time that we found out about him.
Well, we didn't know that at the time.
Yes, but just so you have a sense of the timeline, it was 3 weeks from the time that we found out about him until he was born.
Wow, that's fast.
Well, she didn't know how far along she was, because she had not. She knew she had missed several periods, and then starts doing the math, and then starts understanding the gravity of the situation. She tells her mother. Her mother texts us and says, we have an appointment. She goes and sees the OB, and they say, yes, you have a positive pregnancy test. Yes, we're going to do these labs. Yes, let's set you up for your ultrasound. They do the ultrasound, and within a week,
they did the ultrasound the day before he was born.
She presented back to the clinic with high blood pressure. Mm-hmm. And turns out she had kind of had preeclampsia,
which is, I think, pretty common in teenage mothers, is my understanding.
And the next thing you know, she texts us, and we went from, we're going to the clinic, her blood pressure's high, to we're being admitted, to within 24 hours. I want to say it led into the weekend. I can't remember what day of the week. He was born on a Saturday morning, early. So I think she was like literally clinic visit on Thursday, admitted on Friday. And I don't know if Erin has in her notes.
Saturday morning.
Well, like Friday night was a massive scramble, because it was very clear that this is happening.
Yeah.
We had 2 weeks to digest and say, we're excited. There's a path. We have a baby that's potentially coming in the next
month or two.
No, I think we thought maybe she was like, 4 or 5 months. So maybe we had a couple of 3 or 4 months to kind of get ready. And we're telling parents and we're telling, close friends that this is happening. And then Friday we're admitted to the hospital, and there's a baby, and we don't have a diaper. We don't have, we had a room, but it did not have anything in it. It did not have. And so we went from an infertility journey that had no end in sight to, guys, get ready. There's a baby coming in the next few hours.
Yeah.
So are y'all like running to Walmart at this point? Like,
yes. That was her nesting. Her nesting occurred over 24 hours with friends, literally going to Walmart. And I don't know if it was Walmart or Target or wherever it was, getting the essentials, which come to find out, we had a little bit more time than he
ended up. He was
early.
He was early. He was very small. And so he spent 21 days in the NICU. So we did have those 20 some odd days to kind of adjust to being parents a little bit. I mean, we
kept him in a hotel while we could get it ready. A very expensive medical hotel.
NICU hotel.
Yeah. So we had a very quick transition. Erin mentioned it was a very stressful 72 hours going from that transition from not being a parent to a parent and a baby being there to, oh, by the way, mom cannot sign over her rights until 48 hours after birth. Mm-hmm. And this is after her giving birth and laying eyes on a child, that she could change her mind and say, you know what, I didn't think I wanted this baby, but this baby is very cute and I really want to keep him. And a family member, a sister or a cousin, sister saying, you know what, I can take care of him. Maybe we should keep him in the family. Maybe I should take care of him. And her kind of going through that struggle. I know it was a difficult decision for her, but just that's the way that legally that it has to go. And so I don't think our hearts really were that 48 hours from birth to her signing over her rights were a time in limbo for sure, because of that.
Mm-hmm. So can y'all kind of explain what that process is? Just because like I have absolutely no idea. So she has a baby, you wait 48 hours. Is there like an official from the court? Is there like what does that process entail?
Yes. So as soon as we found out about him, once we kind of knew things were actually progressing, we did meet with a lawyer. And so we did privately contact a lawyer, and she drew up paperwork for us. Now, we still did have to pay for the lawyer fees and that kind of thing. We did have to go to court. Usually, I think in the state of Texas, they wait like 3 months after the baby's born before they let you legally adopt them. But because everything was so cut and dry with our situation, I think we adopted him officially in June. So he was about 2 months old. So we were able to kind of shorten that timeline a little bit. But yes, so we did contact a lawyer, and then that lawyer appoints an ad litem, which is a lawyer that's just representing the child in that situation. So her main focus is just making sure that the best interest of the child is pursued. And then we had our lawyer representing us. And like I said, we did pay for it for those going through this. This was in 2011. I think we paid around $5,000 total for everything. But there were adoption tax credits at the time that
# worth it.
There were adoption tax credits at the time. So we were able to recoup all of that. And actually, again, like all these little side stories, Ben's boss at the time that was working with him actually came forward, and he didn't even know like the cost. He knew nothing about the cost. He just said, I want to pay for y'all's adoption. And so he ended up covering the cost of the adoption.
He was actually how we found the attorney, because once we said, we're trying to figure this out, like researching, what involved, who does, I'm telling him and said, we have to get an attorney for this and that. And he said, oh, I got it. And he sends us the name and number, and turns out he had told her, the attorney, basically, unbeknownst to us at the time, but that was kind of the way that it played out, is, I'm going to take care of the legal fees associated with this.
It's just like divine providence all over.
I mean, it was in so many ways.
And then a week after Jacob was born, some friends threw a baby shower for us so that we could actually get a few things together. And at this baby shower, some friends of ours who knew our infertility struggle also mentioned that they had prayed a novena to St. Joseph for us that happened to coincide with the day we found out about Jacob. And so it is beautiful. And so there's so many little stories like that it's like we knew that God had his hand on this the whole time. So we have Jacob now. He's 13. He's happy, healthy. He's
13.
I enjoyed meeting him. He's really, really personable.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So then after Jacob, what was the transition for your second son, or how did that kind of come about?
So when we were going through our initial infertility struggles, we had looked into embryo adoption, and it just nothing.
Can I pause you there? How did y'all even, like, I know nothing about embryo adoption. Like, how did y'all even like learn? How did you find out like church teaching on those things? Because like obviously there was a hard line.
There's not any.
Well,
okay, that's what I'm like. I'm so confused about it. So yeah, just like whatever light you can shed, just like educate me and the populace.
I mean, I kind of stumbled across embryo adoption in the beginning of our journey, just because, I mean, when you start Googling, infertility or adoption options, those kind of things come up. And so we had heard about it. I think I mentioned earlier that our infertility doctor was trying to get an FDA approval for embryo adoption for the embryos that were stored at her facility. And so we were on the list for that. But she said the hardest part of that is getting people to relinquish the rights to those embryos, obviously. So she was just waiting on someone to say, yes, we have these embryos, and to sign them over. Obviously, that ended up never happening. And so we started pursuing a private embryo adoption. And there's multiple websites out there, and it's so much like online dating.
It is match.com for infertiles.
I did not even know that was a thing, you guys.
It's a thing. And so these couples who have created embryos put their profiles out there and say, we have X amount of embryos and this is what we're looking for. And then we have our profile out there and we say, we're Ben and Erin from Texas and we have these kids and, this is what we want. Because some of those people who are donating embryos want a family type relationship. They want to raise kids together. They want, some of them want a close relationship. And so we wanted somewhere in between. We wanted our kids, I feel like it's important for our kids to know that they're adopted, number one. From day one, they've both known. And to have the ability to contact their biological or birth parents if they want to in the future. I don't ever want to keep them from their biological parents just because that's an important part of who they are and where they came from. So we definitely didn't want a closed adoption, but we also didn't want to raise our kids with strangers that we didn't know or didn't have the same beliefs with. So we ended up matching and finding a family on this website, and we're able to adopt 2 embryos, a boy and a girl. And so when that happens, I had to go through all the same fertility treatments except for the egg retrieval as in vitro. And so it's just a lot of hormones. It's a lot of prep, and it's challenging on your body for sure.
Another thing that was really interesting, and the things that you learn through that process was once, and this is where, I mentioned there's not a lot of church teaching on it because the church ends up sitting on 2 sides of this story going, we are very pro embryo, pro life, pro get these souls to heaven, but we are very against introduction of the third, we are against IVF, mm-hmm. Right? And so in one way, this is very much in line with the church's, story, for the salvation of these souls, but through a medium that it didn't endorse in the first place. Okay. And so very interestingly, once the match happens and they say, here it is, these are across different states, different laws, different policies. This was actually a much easier process, and it was significantly cheaper initially because turns out, at least in the state of Texas, to adopt these embryos, the state views it as a transfer of property.
Oh. And
this is a very, very, come to find out, we used it a different attorney just because it was a different friend he was a Catholic family that we know. And
actually, he was a former priest.
Priest.
He was very invested in, he was looking, helping us research also the moral and ethical concerns. And so he was invested emotionally and spiritually as well as legally with us.
But it turns out it's a very, very simple, from a legal standpoint, a very, very simple legal document to the tune of just a couple of pages to say, these individuals are signing over this property to these individuals. It will be shipped from this place to this place. And then you own this, quote, property, which happens to be, in our eyes, two babies. Mm-hmm. But to the state, it's
property.
It's just, it might as well be pieces of paper, to them. It's nothing more than a chair that I have this chair and you want this chair and I'm going to give you this chair. Because you obviously can't pay for that, right? Yeah. We're not buying these babies from them. We're not buying this property from them. That's a very, very sticky wicket. We are paying an attorney and they are paying an attorney and we are transferring property. So it was a very, very interesting thing to learn that when you actually think about it, that the state views it much, much differently than the people that are involved in that transition. So yeah, and then we transitioned into that learning about how do you get these embryos? How does this become? How do we get them? How do we get their feet on the ground? Which was
what is that? I have no idea.
It's very, very similar to the process that somebody might go through for IVF. That if we
I
create
thought
these.
you were talking about the physical embryos. The physical embryos are
they're
frozen in like some sort of tank. I mean, it looks like a tank of helium if you've ever seen that before.
Yeah.
And so
they're frozen at very, very sub-zero temperatures that basically stops all cellular activity until you're ready to thaw them, and that's a whole different process that doesn't happen until you have prepared the mother for that process, which was
I think it was like a 3-month
3 months
process because they send you into menopause. So you take Lupron shots, which sends you into menopause and stops your cycles completely, so that they can control every little hormone that goes in your body. So then you start.
Erin, you carried the babies to term? Oh, okay.
Which was another, that was something that we had grown our family by one through a means, but it was not through pregnancy. So Erin had she had not gotten to experience that, which was, she had said adoption was near and dear to her heart, but I think pregnancy is near and dear to every woman's heart. That is not a rite of passage, but it's something that's very important to them to be able to experience as the cross that they want to bear. And so this, talk about checking multiple boxes of allowing her to experience pregnancy and us to get to experience pregnancy. I mean, that's a process that the husband gets to be a part of too, that it allowed her to carry.
Well, and you can control the prenatal care, whereas,
we didn't in the first case.
Yeah,
we didn't in the first case, or in our with Jacob. But yeah, that 3-month process of a very medically rigorous thing to stop the cycle and then start the cycle and then prepare. Basically, you got to prepare her body to accept this embryo and create the best possible environment for it. Leading up to the day of transfer, which
there are so many unknowns with embryo adoption as well. The embryos, they thaw the morning of. So you prepare your body for these 3 months. And then the morning of the actual transfer, I think we may have transferred around lunchtime. At like 4 o'clock that morning, the embryologist starts to thaw that embryo, and there's a chance it may not survive. So I think we were given like a 50% chance that it would thaw successfully. And then after that, you have a 50% chance of implantation, meaning that the woman actually gets pregnant and the baby is carried to term. So, I mean, the odds, there's odds stacked against you on both sides, right? So, but we were able to successfully carry Sam, our youngest. He's now 8. And then when he was about 2, we went back with our second embryo and transferred, and we did lose her. She didn't implant. And so, but we did know it was a girl. And so we gave her a name, Johanna, and it's our little saint in heaven. And so our family still talks about Johanna. A friend of mine who also went through embryo adoption mentioned that she felt like, even if these embryos didn't survive, she felt so blessed to be a vessel to help them get to heaven. And so that really impacted me, that I was like, that's beautiful that, my body could have been a part of that. So I do think even if it wasn't successful, it's still a beautiful thing to, essentially free these embryos from being in frozen limbo, right?
Yeah, a gift to give those souls. Yeah, that's beautiful. So can y'all talk about, because there's so much that you guys have shared, very intense things emotionally. How did you two as a couple approach these very difficult conversations?
It was not easy. I will say we've talked so much about our faith, our Catholic faith, and in the moment, like in the thick of things, it's something we wrestled with, right? Like, I struggled with the church's teachings on IVF and the church's teachings with birth control and all these different things. And I felt like it was such a roadblock when we first started trying to get pregnant, because I was like, God, they just don't want us to get pregnant. They just don't want this to happen. It's just, they're being difficult, it's almost like being a teenager and fighting back against your parents, trying to help you and teaching you, right? It's not easy. It's uncomfortable. But I think we've mentioned this multiple times, like being on the other side of things, looking back, I'm so thankful for the church's teachings, because who knows, I mean, we would probably be broke and have embryos stored and just be in all kinds of mess. And so I'm so thankful for the church's teachings for sure, because I think it helped guide us to where we are and helped us to make the decisions that we made. And then I think the whole situation drew us closer to each other and closer to our faith.
I actually don't recall, you ask like, how did you have those discussions? I don't really recall us ever having, a big knockdown drag out, like you want to do this and I want to do that. We never really had that, because this is true for a lot of situations, but we had more in common than we didn't, right? Is we had common goals, being we wanted to grow our family. We had common goals of, there was some individuality to those, that Erin wanted to experience pregnancy, and there were some, things that maybe I dealt with as far as like, I want to adopt, but I also want to be able to do this like the normal way that everybody wants to be able to do it, and struggling with that personally. But we never really we were so united on that front that we wanted to achieve it, but we wanted to do it the right way. So I would say we had more knockdown dragouts with ourselves and Jesus than we had with each other. That it was like, why are there so many things in the way? We marched along that journey, but there was never. We had united ourselves with each other through marriage in one of those sacraments to say this. Going our different ways was not an option. That's never been an option. It's not going to be an option. So that was not this was a journey we were going to make together. So that was never a discussion. We wanted to be able to grow our family, and we were going to do that in line with the teachings of the church. And I had my individual, battles with that, and Erin had her individual battles with that. But our battles individually were our collective battle as a couple. It wasn't a me against her or her against me. It was us against,
our struggle.
And so that was which is what in turn ended up being what grew us closer to. It grew us closer to our children. Now it grew us closer in our faith, in our marriage. It grew us closer to God. And so yeah, it's interesting that the cross that we still bear, I mean, it's a part of us for forever. It's a scar. It's it never goes away, but in a way it's a scar that we never ever change. We've told the story we'll tell it to whoever wants to listen to it. Yeah. Right. And, it's very unique. It's not necessarily, it's particularly pertinent for the podcast being Catholic based, but we've told it to people who are not Catholic. Yeah.
That's something that we both, probably me more than Ben, feel very passionately about, is sharing our story, because it was a lonely journey. Being Catholic and infertile is hard, but it's also lonely, because there are so many big Catholic families that are having kids, and then you just feel stuck. So then we also felt like we lost friends in the process. In hindsight, we didn't. It was more of our own struggle with ourselves, and our own bitterness and jealousness that we were struggling with. But that's why I'm so open to telling our story too, is that just I hope to be a friend to someone else, even if I don't actually meet them, to be a friend, to like journey along with someone else who's going through this, or to help someone know that, like, yes, following the church's teaching is frustrating, but it's a good thing. Like, in hindsight, we're so thankful that we did it. And so,
because for all the big, beautiful Catholic families that are out there with 4, 5, 8 children, there are absolutely beautiful Catholic families out there that are struggling with infertility, be it they never got pregnant, or struggling with infertility in the sense that they've had multiple miscarriages, in the sense that they are not able to grow their family just like we wanted to grow our family. And they are out there.
Yeah,
they are out there probably much more than the big, beautiful Catholic families that everybody sees, that in the darkness, in the Adoration Chapel, they're there. And so if we can tell somebody our story, to give them a little bit of hope, to say that there is life on the other side. There is, that his plan is truly divine. His plan is truly going to be executed. It's just on his time, not yours. But there's a lot of those people are out there. They're just very, very quiet a lot of times when they're in that struggle.
Just like suffering in silence.
Suffering in silence is very much so, because I think the families of those people, I think it's a struggle for them too, but that's probably the hardest part, is because how many people are pressured, especially as young people, that you've completed high school, you've completed college, you've gotten married. The next step is have babies. The next step is grow your family. And not everybody's views are the same. And so it's very difficult, and you are almost forced to suffer in silence when you're discussing it with your parents, because this is your journey, it's not theirs, and so it's not really something you have to walk this journey. You are walking it together, and it's so just to give that kind of hope and inspiration to people, because it's just not something that's talked about. You just don't. It doesn't come up in conversation. Hey, how's your family growth going? It doesn't come up naturally in conversation until you realize that, oh, it turns out we have walked the journey that you are walking currently, or we are walking that journey together at the same time.
And they always say like hindsight's 2020, and I think you both alluded to that. Looking back, you can see just like the providence of so many things along the way. Would you both just be open to individually answering, like, how has your intimacy with the Lord changed being on the other side of this?
It's definitely just continued to grow. I mean, like most people's journey with the Lord, it's kind of cyclical, right? So we have moments of lukewarmness, and then we have moments of strength, and we kind of cycle back through, just depending on what's going on in our lives. But definitely my trust in the Lord is 100%. I can't tell you how many times we've said, well, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be, and it'll happen. And I don't have that doubt. Before, I think, this infertility journey, I would say those things, but not necessarily feel them in my heart or truly trust in the Lord, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Whereas now I'm like, he's got it. Like, we've been in a rent house for 5 years, and we're like, we don't know when we're going to have a house, but oh, well, when it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And we truly believe that, because we've seen that providence in our lives. We've seen him work in our lives. And I think I've talked with many people about this here recently, but once you feel the Lord actually touch your heart and touch your lives and actually like move in your life, like, it's so easy then to be like, all right, he's got this. Like, whatever's supposed to happen will happen. And so it definitely has grown my intimacy, to answer your question. But it's also grown my trust in him. So just like any relationship, it kind of changes, but the trust is the big thing for me. It's solidified 100% of my trust in him.
I think it was beautifully said. I don't know that I have, like, I think this journey, it's very, while it's individual, it's more of a group. I think the trust in, we want to believe that God only gives us what we want, but he truly gives us what we need.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, like, it's really interesting. And these are all the things that kind of, pregnancy it's not fun. Like, it is a very taxing thing for the body. And there's a lot of struggles, and whether it's the physical discomfort or the emotional struggle. I will tell you that, and Erin will, and I will say it, but Erin will tell you that, I mean, she didn't complain one time, because for all of those times, this was what she wanted, right? She desired so much to be sick in the morning with a baby. She desired so much for her feet to be swollen. She desired so much for that to happen. I think we have constant reminders, because raising kids, it's not fun.
It's hard. Yeah, it's very hard.
It's not for the faint of heart.
It is hard, but everything that we do is hard. Marriage is hard. Marriage is not fun. Marriage is work, and raising kids is work, and it's hard, but it's a constant reminder that if we really back up and look at it, that it really is beautiful. It's what we're called to do. And so in those days where we're raising a 13-year-old, that is really hard, we have to remind ourselves that it's what we're called to do, and he has a plan, and his plan's truly divine, and we have to be a part of that execution. And we're going to continue to do that to the best of our ability, but we can't do that 5 years from now until we do it today. And so, we do it today, and we try to raise them in the faith. They both know their faith well. They know their story well. They know their adoption story. it's a really beautiful thing that, once we're gone, that they'll continue to tell this story, for the next generation, because to tell the story of adoption or tell the story of their faith, hopefully they continue that. We don't get to decide that. That's their story. That's their journey to walk. So that's how it's played out with me. I don't know if that's my intimacy journey. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's how it continues to be played out for me on a daily basis.
Yeah, no, I think that answers the question perfectly, because to be in relationship with the Lord requires hard things. Like maybe it was Father Mike or somebody like that, and he said, like, God doesn't have grandchildren. Like, each generation has to choose for themselves. Will you be mine? And just the cost that it takes. Like, you guys had to make some hard decisions to follow what the church teaches, and like, you persevered and you were faithful to what the church taught, and like, you see the beauty of that. And so I just thank you both so much for your witness and your testimony. Do y'all have anything? So last two questions. Do y'all have any like resources or books or anything that y'all would like to share with people? And then the second question would be any just last thoughts or anything you want to share for other people who are where you guys are.
Read the catechism. Yeah, definitely. The catechism was my friend, just reading it and researching. And I'll be really honest, prior to our infertility journey, I didn't own a catechism. And so that was important for us that I got one and I started reading it and was like, oh, this is really awesome that it teaches it tells us everything that the church teaches. And some of the language is hard, but also it's pretty clear as to right and wrong, right? I did pull out this book. I had a book that I read called Hannah's Hope by Jennifer Saki. That book really helped me. It chronicles Hannah's journey in 1 Samuel, struggling with her infertility. And so it's a short couple of verses where they talk about Hannah's struggle, but it kind of delves really deep into it, and then kind of walks you through the infertility journey. So that book for me was pretty pivotal. It kind of became a diary for me, like as I was in adoration, writing in it, and just stirred up a lot of good conversations with me and the Lord. And so I definitely recommend that book. It's not specifically Catholic, but it was a great book. And I can't recall anything that was like contrary to the Catholic Church. So I do want to put that caveat out there that, like, if there is something in there, I apologize, but it was meaningful to me for sure.
I don't have any. Erin should write a book. She should write our story. I'm going to put that on her, but
do it, Erin.
yeah, no, I don't have any. I don't have any books or any words of wisdom other than what we've already said.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you guys both again so much for coming and just sharing and being open to putting your hearts out there for other people who have struggled with infertility or are there now. There's so many people that I talk to, and it's just not something that's, like you said, it's not really spoken about a lot. So thank y'all so much for coming on and doing this with us.
Yeah,
awesome.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right, everyone. That'll do it for today's episode of the Memento Mori Fight Club. Remember, nothing is wasted. Keep fighting the good fight.